Hello, welcome to another of the Bhagavad Gita series. I'm going to make this about one verse to try to keep it short. Today's entry is Bhagavad Gita Chapter 3, verse 34. And to understand this verse, you have to look at the previous verse, which is in the previous video in this series. Where in verse 33 it talks about how even an intelligent man, though he may try otherwise, is still controlled by the elements of the material world. All living beings are subject to this. So what good will self-restriction do? And this is like the basic argument of the last video, was saying that there's not really any purpose in trying to avoid action, trying to escape the material elements. But now, this is very interesting. Verse 34. Of the senses and the sensed, of what you desire and what you wish to avoid, you should put all of these under some control. You should never be controlled by them, or else things will distract you from being conscious. So in this verse, we get all of a sudden a kind of what might seem like the opposite message. That we're told, well, some control is useful. And well, some control is useful not because the purpose is to escape from the boundaries of yourself or of your being or of physical reality or of the elements or any of those things. It's not that going and becoming an ascetic in the hills is inherently useful, or much less the point of spirituality or something like that. There's not really an inherent purpose in attempting to engage in spiritual or religious strictures. But there are reasons why it can be done. And the thing is, throughout history, people have looked at this sort of thing and they've made wrong interpretations. So you could see some people, let's say, somebody has a spiritual experience and they become awakened. And then after this awakening, they change somewhat and they're now unwilling to hurt even a little bird or a little fly or a tiny animal. And so someone else looks at this and they say, oh, well, it must mean that if you don't hurt little animals, you'll become enlightened. That doesn't necessarily follow, right? In the Buddha's time, he made all kinds of rules and strictures. He made a structure, he made a system. But many people looked at that system and misunderstood the purpose of the system. They assumed that the system was itself the goal, right? That the system was the way that you could make sure of attaining enlightenment. They saw that the system consisted largely of certain disciplines, of restricting certain things. And so they went on to assume that, well, if you restrict more things, it must make you enlightened faster or more enlightened, right? And so you had things like in Buddha's own time, a group of his students came to him insisting that they wanted to change the rules so that you couldn't eat meat anymore, because the Buddha ate meat and he allowed the eating of meat. And the Buddha told them no. He said, no, you've misunderstood. That's not the point. Right? The point is to overcome attachment. If you become attached to your own sense of restrictions, if you're become attached to the idea that you should care about one type of food versus another, then you've missed the point. And we see this sort of thing again and again. People will see a set of spiritual disciplines also, if they're taken out of context, then you don't really understand what they're for, what they do, right? So people might see the dances of the Sufi dervishes, or they might look at the movements of someone practicing internal qigong, and one might say, oh, well, the point of the Sufi whirling is to enter into an ecstatic state, right? Or they might look at the Qigong and they might think, well, that training is to make your body perfectly healthy, right? And this is an assumption that they create, and then they project on that, and then entire systems, entire Sufi orders or entire Qigong schools have been built on those flawed assumptions. So, at the same time, you should put your senses and what your desire for what you sense, your desire for what you want to avoid, these things should be under some control. And what's the key? So how do you know what to control or what not to control, right? The answer is very simple. You need to understand what the purpose is. The purpose is transformation. The purpose is enlightenment. First, before the enlightenment, the purpose is to discover the true will, and then through the true will to enlightenment. So if that's the purpose, anything you do that assists you towards that purpose is good, is useful, it's practical, and anything that doesn't is not good, it's not useful, it's useless, it's impractical. What does this mean? Well, one 20th century commentator, Aleister Crowley, he had put it this way, and it's very astute, that if you're sitting and practicing meditation, then you don't want to commit violence, for example, to an animal, because that will disrupt your mind. It'll make you feel ill at ease. If you hit a dog, right, then this ends up being a distraction to your ability to focus, to direct yourself into that state of consciousness, correct? So this is something, a kind of a restriction that you want to do. One of the reason to avoid violence isn't because of some kind of moral lesson from God or because Jesus told you to or something like that, but it is because it gets in the way of your own ability to fully manifest your own will, to fully manifest your own consciousness, to be complete within yourself. Because in and of itself, it is a sign that you are disconnected from the environment around you. But if you are in the middle of intense meditation and there is a dog barking and the distraction of that dog barking is worse than the distraction that might be caused by you hitting the dog, then you should hit the dog. So this is the rule. The rule is about finding the most skillful means towards the attaining of the transcendent state. So some control is useful because, of course, if you're completely overwhelmed, if you're letting yourself be distracted and be controlled by your senses, by your desires, by what you wish to avoid, by all these sorts of things, then of course that's not going to be helpful to the path of self-transformation. And that's the point. So that's it for today. Please be sure, if you like this video, to feel free to share it, subscribe to our playlist or to my channel. Keep an eye on the Bhagavad Gita playlist. And if you're interested in receiving spiritual training, please feel free to contact me about the Yi Fa Society. You can see the videos of the Yi Fa Society, the public ones, here on the channel as well. Thank you very much.